It seemed like a normal Family Feud taping until something happened that made Steve Harvey stop the show completely. It was a moment so powerful, so unexpected, that everyone in the studio, from the cameramen to the audience members, would never forget that day. Three men who had been searching for each other without even knowing it were about to discover a truth that would shatter everything they thought they knew about their lives. The Davidson family from Cleveland stood at their positions, ready to play. Mike Davidson, 45 years old with weathered hands and an easy smile, stood at the center. His wife Sarah, a second-grade teacher, held his hand tightly. Their three kids, Michael Jr., Emma, and Tyler, filled out the rest of the team. "So Mike," Steve said during the introductions, "tell me what you do for a living." Mike grinned. "I'm a general contractor, Steve. Been building houses for 23 years now." "That's good, honest work," Steve replied. "And I see you got your beautiful family here." "Yes, sir," Mike said proudly. "Sarah and I have been married 22 years next month. These three keep us on our toes." What Mike didn't know was that backstage, two men were watching on monitors, their hands shaking, their hearts racing. They had never met Mike Davidson, had no idea he existed until 6 weeks ago. But they shared something with him that went deeper than anyone could imagine. "Tell me about your kids," Steve continued. "Well, Michael Jr. here just started working with me in the business. He's learning the trade. Emma's in college studying to be a nurse. And Tyler's our athlete, plays 3 sports in high school. Following in Dad's footsteps," Steve said to Michael Jr. "That must make you proud, Mike." Mike's eyes softened. "It does. You know, I never had anyone to learn from when I was starting out. My dad passed when I was real young, so I had to figure it all out myself. Makes it extra special to pass it on to my son." In the production booth, the executive producer was giving subtle signals to Steve. After 20 years of hosting the show, Steve could read these cues without the audience noticing. Something was coming. Something big. The game proceeded normally for the first round. The Davidsons were doing well, their natural chemistry as a family evident in how they played off each other. During a commercial break, Steve chatted with them more casually. "You know what's funny?" Mike said during the break. "I've always felt like something was missing. Don't get me wrong. I love my family more than anything. But there's always been this feeling I can't shake." Sarah squeezed his shoulder. "He's talked about it since we met in college. Like there's a piece of a puzzle he can't find." When they returned from commercial, Steve's entire demeanor had shifted. Those who knew him well could see it. A certain gravity in his movements. An extra gentleness in his voice. "Mike," Steve began, "before we continue with the game, I need to ask you something. You mentioned your dad passed when you were young. What do you know about your early childhood?" Mike looked confused but answered honestly. "Dad had passed in an accident. We didn't have any other family." "And you never questioned that?" "Why would I?" Mike shrugged. "Mom was everything to me. She worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat. Never complained. She passed 10 years ago, and I miss her every day." "Mike," Steve moved closer. "Mike, what if I told you that your mother loved you so much, she made an impossible choice to protect you? What if I told you that there are parts of your story you don't know?" The studio had gone completely silent. Mike's face showed confusion, mixed with the first stirrings of something else. Hope, maybe, or fear. "What are you talking about, Steve?" 6 weeks ago, Steve continued, a man in Toledo took a DNA test. His daughter gave it to him for his birthday. When the results came back, they showed something unexpected. A match. A very close match. Mike's legs seemed unsteady. Michael Jr. quickly moved to support his father. "What kind of match?" Mike whispered. "A brother," Steve said gently. "Mike, you have a brother." The audience gasped. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. Emma started crying. That's impossible," Mike said. "Mom said it was just us," she said. Your mom did what she had to do, Steve said. But Mike, that's not all. The DNA test showed something else. You don't just have one brother. You have two. Mike had to sit down. The studio steps were right there, and he sank onto them, his family surrounding him protectively. Two brothers? His voice was barely audible. Triplets, Steve confirmed. You're one of three identical triplets, separated when you were very young. And Mike. They're here. The audience erupted in gasps and exclamations. Mike was openly weeping now, supported by his wife and children. They're here? He managed to ask. Right now? Steve nodded and turned toward the wings. Tom? Jimmy? Come on out and meet your brother. The men who walked onto that stage could have been Mike's reflections. Tom Bennett, 45 years old, wearing jeans and a work shirt that could have come from Mike's own closet. Jimmy Crawford, same age, same build, same way of walking with a slight favor to his right knee from an old injury. The three men stood frozen, staring at each other across the stage. It was Tyler, Mike's youngest, who broke the spell. Dad, he said softly, they look exactly like you. Mike took a tentative step forward, then another. Tom and Jimmy moved too, drawn by something beyond conscious thought. They met in the center of the stage, and for a long moment, they just looked at each other. Same eyes, same nose, same hands, all calloused from years of working with tools. My God, Tom breathed. It's like looking in a mirror. Two mirrors, Jimmy added, his voice shaking. They came together in an embrace that 41 years in the making. Three men who had been brothers before they could walk, before they could talk, before they could form memories, holding each other and crying without shame. The entire studio was in tears. Steve himself had to walk away for a moment, ostensibly to get tissues, but really, to compose himself. When the triplets finally pulled apart, they couldn't stop staring at each other. All this time, Mike said. All this time you were out there. We were looking, Tom said. We just didn't know it. Steve gently guided them to sit on the family feud steps, their families hovering nearby, unsure whether to intrude on this moment. Tom. Jimmy, Steve said. Tell us your stories. When did you find out about each other? Tom wiped his eyes with hands that were mirror images of Mike's. My daughter Amanda, she's into all that genealogy stuff. Got me a DNA kit for Father's Day. I didn't think much of it, just spit in the tube to make her happy. Then the results came back. I'd done one a year earlier, Jimmy continued. My wife Nancy had been bugging me about it for ages. When Tom's results came in, the company notified me about a match. A sibling match. We couldn't believe it, Tom said. I mean, I was raised an only child. My mom always said it was just us two against the world. Same here, Jimmy added. Mom passed 5 years ago. She never said a word about brothers. When we found each other, Tom continued, we started comparing notes. Both of us were adopted, but we didn't know that until we were teenagers. Both of us had been told our birth parents had passed. Then we started noticing other things. Like what? Steve prompted. Everything, Jimmy said with a weak laugh. We both work in construction. Tom's an electrician. I'm a plumber. We both married teachers. We both have 3 kids. We both coach Little League. And then, Tom said, we did more research. The adoption records were sealed, but we found out we were part of a sibling group from Ohio. 3 boys. 3. Mike repeated, still stunned. Mom never. She never said anything. Steve turned to the audience. Now, what you don't know is that our incredible research team has been working to piece together this story. And what they found is both heartbreaking and beautiful. A screen lowered behind them. Steve continued. These 3 boys were born to a young woman named Linda Patterson. She was 17 years old, living in Cincinnati. The father had left when he found out she was pregnant. When she learned it was triplets, she tried to keep them. Photos appeared on the screen, old, grainy images from the early 1980s. A young woman, barely more than a girl, holding 3 infants. She kept you for 6 months, Steve continued. But she was overwhelmed. No family support, working minimum wage, trying to care for 3 babies. Child services got involved. Mike's voice was thick with emotion. So she gave us up? Not exactly, Steve said gently. The records show she tried to keep you together, begged them not to separate you. But back then, the system believed it was easier to place single children than sibling groups, especially triplets. They split us up, Tom said flatly. They did. But here's where it gets extraordinary. The 3 families who adopted you, they had no idea about each other. But look at who they were. More photos appeared. Tom, you were adopted by Robert and Jean Bennett in Toledo. Your dad was a carpenter. Jimmy, you went to Paul and Mary Crawford in Dayton. Your dad was a plumber. And Mike, you were adopted by David and Ruth Davidson in Youngstown. Wait, Jimmy interrupted. They all worked in construction? All 3 fathers were in the building trades, Steve confirmed. Whether that was intentional by the adoption agency or just an incredible coincidence, we don't know. But all 3 of you were raised by men who worked with their hands, who built things. That's why we all ended up in construction, Mike said wonderingly. We learned from our dads. But there's more, Steve continued. Your adoptive mothers, Jean, Mary, and Ruth, they all did something remarkable. Maybe they sensed something, maybe they just knew, but all 3 of them made sure you grew up knowing the value of family. Sarah, Mike's wife, suddenly spoke up. Mike's mom used to say something. Family isn't always blood, but blood is always family. I never understood what she meant. Nancy, Jimmy's wife, gasped. Mary used to say the same thing. Not those exact words, but the sentiment. Tom's wife, Lisa, was nodding. Jean, too. She'd say, some connections run deeper than we know. Maybe they did know something, Steve suggested. Or maybe they just understood that their boys needed to value family because someday they'd find their own. The triplets were processing all of this, their faces showing wonder and grief in equal measure. Can I see them again? Mike asked. The pictures of us as babies? The photos reappeared. 3 identical babies, dressed differently but with the same serious expression, the same way of clutching their tiny fists. Look at that one. Tom pointed to a photo of them together in a crib. We're all reaching for each other. 6 months, Jimmy said softly. We had 6 months together, and now you have the rest of your lives, Steve reminded them. Let's bring out your families properly. I think it's time for a full reunion. Tom's family came out first. Lisa, his wife of 23 years, and their children, Amanda, Tom Jr., and Katie. Then Jimmy's family, Nancy, and their kids, James, Beth, and Christopher. The stage was suddenly full of people who looked alike in ways that went beyond the triplets. Oh my God, Emma, Mike's daughter exclaimed. Katie, you look just like me. Katie Bennett, Tom's daughter, was indeed strikingly similar to her newly discovered cousin. Same age, same build, same way of tilting her head when she smiled. This is insane, Tom Jr. said, shaking hands with Michael Jr. and James. We're all about the same height, same build. We all got the family genes, James laughed. Whatever those are, the wives gravitated toward each other immediately. Sarah, Lisa, and Nancy stood in a small circle, comparing notes. How long have you been married? Sarah asked. 23 years, Lisa answered. 24 for us, Nancy added. 22, Sarah said. And you're all teachers? 3rd grade, Lisa said. 1st grade, Nancy replied. 2nd grade, Sarah laughed. Of course we are. Of course we all teach primary school. Steve watched the families blend together with obvious emotion. You know what's amazing? You can see how the kids are naturally pairing off. Look at the boys, all standing the same way, hands in their pockets. And the girls are already exchanging phone numbers. We have so much to catch up on, Mike said to his brothers. 41 years. How do you even start? You start with today, Steve suggested, and you move forward from here. Tom suddenly turned to Mike. Do you ever have that dream? The one where you're in a big house looking for something? Mike's eyes widened. All the time. I'm searching through rooms, and I know something important is there, but I can never find it. I have it too, Jimmy breathed. Nancy's heard me wake up from it 100 times. Maybe you were looking for each other, Steve suggested. Dreams have a way of holding on to what we've lost. The conversation turned to their lives, their careers, their families. The similarities kept piling up in ways that seemed impossible, but weren't. They'd all started their businesses at age 25, all had their first child at 27, all drove pickup trucks. Tom a Ford, Jimmy a Chevy, Mike a Ram, which caused some good-natured ribbing. What about health stuff? Amanda, Tom's daughter asked. Dad, you know how you've always had that weird allergy to shellfish? Don't tell me, Mike started. Yep, Jimmy confirmed. Throat closes right up. Found out the hard way at a wedding. Me too, Mike exclaimed. When I was 28. At my cousin's wedding. Okay, that's spooky, Michael Jr. said. The families shared more stories, finding connection after connection. All three men had coached their sons' Little League teams. All three had taught their kids to work with their hands. All three had the same philosophy about hard work and family values. You know what gets me, Tom said. We live so close. Toledo, Dayton, Youngstown. We probably passed each other on the highway 1,000 times. Our kids might have played against each other in tournaments, Jimmy added. We were at the state championships in Columbus 3 years ago. We were there, Mike exclaimed. Tyler's team. You were there? James's team, Jimmy confirmed. We would have been in the same complex. Ships passing in the night, Steve observed. For 41 years. But not anymore, Lisa said firmly. We're family now, all of us. The kids were already making plans. The boys were talking about a fantasy football league, the girls about a shared family vacation. The ease with which they connected was remarkable to watch. Dad, Beth, Jimmy's daughter said suddenly, tell them about your thing with Christmas lights. Jimmy looked embarrassed. It's nothing. I just like to go a little overboard with the decorations. A little? Nancy laughed. He starts planning in July, has a whole notebook full of diagrams. Mike started laughing. I do the same thing. Sarah threatens to leave me every November when I drag out the boxes. 12,000 lights last year, Tom admitted sheepishly. Lisa made me get an electrical inspection. Of course you all do that, Steve said. Of course you do. 3 electricians/construction guys who go crazy with Christmas lights. Your poor wives. We've learned to live with it, the wives said almost in unison, then laughed at the synchronicity. As the taping continued, more connections emerged. All 3 men had proposed to their wives at baseball games. All 3 had broken their right ankle. Tom at 15, Jimmy at 17, Mike at 16. All 3 had dogs, different breeds, but all named Duke. Duke? Duke, Steve asked. All 3 of you named your dogs Duke? Like John Wayne, the triplets said in unison, then stared at each other. That's what I say, Mike exclaimed. When people ask about the name, me too, Tom and Jimmy said together. The afternoon wore on, but no one wanted it to end. The producers had long since given up any pretense of returning to the regular game format. This was television history, and everyone knew it. I want to know about Mom, Mike said suddenly. Our birth mom. Is she? Steve's expression softened. Linda Patterson passed away 8 years ago, but your research team found her sister, your aunt. She sent this. He handed them a letter. The 3 brothers huddled together to read it. Tom holding one side, Jimmy the other, Mike in the middle. Dear boys, Mike read aloud, his voice shaking. I've waited 41 years to write this letter. My sister Linda never forgot you, not for a single day. She was 17 and scared and trying her best. When they took you, it broke her. She fought to keep you together, But the system was different then. They promised you'd go to good families, and she had to trust that. Tom took over reading. She never had other children. She said you three were her boys, even if she couldn't keep you. Every year on your birthday, October 15th, she'd make a cake with 3 candles. She'd look for you in every crowd, wondering if she'd recognize you. Jimmy continued with tears streaming. She'd be so happy to know you found each other. She used to say that brothers have a bond that can't be broken, that you'd find your way back to each other someday. She was right. Take care of each other now. You're together again, just like she always prayed you'd be. Love, Aunt Dorothy. All 3 men were crying now, along with everyone else in the studio. October 15th, Mike said. We'll be together, Tom said firmly. All of us. We'll light 3 candles for her. And for us, Jimmy added. Steve gave them time to compose themselves before asking, so what happens now? You've found each other. You live in different cities. How do you make up for 41 years? You don't make up for it, Mike said thoughtfully. You can't get back what's gone. But we've got years ahead of us. Our kids are young enough to grow up knowing their cousins. We can be there for each other now. We're already planning Thanksgiving, Sarah announced. Everyone's coming to Cleveland. All 3 families. Christmas is in Toledo, Lisa added. We'll have enough Christmas lights to be seen from space with all 3 of them decorating. And we're thinking about going into business together, Tom said, looking at his brothers. Bennett, Crawford, and Davidson Construction. We've got all the trades covered between us. BCD Construction, Jimmy said, grinning. I like it. Alphabetical order. Mike laughed. Fair enough. The families continued to blend and plan, the studio forgotten as they focused on each other. The teenage cousins were already following each other on social media, the wives were exchanging recipes and phone numbers, and the men kept finding new things they had in common. Hey, Christopher, Jimmy's youngest, said suddenly. Does this mean I have 6 cousins now instead of none? It means you have a lot more than that, Jimmy told his son. It means you have a whole extended family you didn't know about. Aunts, uncles, cousins, the whole package. Cool, Christopher said simply, and everyone laughed. Steve brought out a photo album the producers had created, filled with pictures the families had submitted. Page by page, they went through 41 years of parallel lives. First days of school, Little League games, high school graduations, weddings, the births of children. Look at this. Amanda pointed to photos of all 3 men at their high school graduations. Same stance, same smile, same way of holding the diploma. And here, Beth added, showing wedding photos. All 3 of you have your hands in your pockets the exact same way. The similarities in the photos were undeniable. 3 lives lived separately, but somehow in sync, as if some invisible thread had connected them across the miles and years. I have a question, Tyler, Mike's youngest said. If you're all identical, how do we tell you apart now? The 3 men looked at each other and laughed. Up close, there were subtle differences. Tom had a small scar above his left eyebrow from a childhood accident. Jimmy wore glasses. Mike had a slightly grayer beard. But from a distance, they were indistinguishable. Good thing we live in different cities, Tom joked. Can you imagine the confusion if we all lived on the same street? Don't give them ideas, Lisa warned. I can see them plotting already. As the taping finally wound down, Steve gathered all 3 families together for one last moment. You know, he said, in all my years hosting this show, I've seen a lot of families. Happy families, fighting families, families that make you laugh, families that make you think. But today I've seen something else. I've seen a family being born. He looked at the triplets, standing together naturally now, their body language already synchronized. You 3 were separated by circumstances beyond anyone's control. But look what happened. You all grew up to be good men. You all found love, raised families, built businesses. You became the kind of men who coach Little League and go overboard with Christmas lights and teach their kids the value of hard work. And now, he continued, your kids get to grow up together. Your wives have instant sisters. You three get to be brothers for whatever years God gives you. That's not a consolation prize for what you missed. That's a gift many people never get. The families nodded, many wiping away fresh tears. Before we go, Steve said, I want each of you to say something to your brothers. Tom went first. Mike, Jimmy, I've felt incomplete my whole life. I thought it was just me being weird. Now I know it was real. You were missing. But we're here now, and I promise you, I'm not going anywhere. We're brothers. Always have been. Always will be. Jimmy spoke next. I used to dream about having brothers when I was a kid. Used to pretend I had siblings to play with. Turns out, I wasn't pretending. I was remembering. We're going to make up for lost time, not by trying to reclaim what's gone, but by making the most of what's ahead. Mike took a breath before speaking. Mom, my adoptive mom, used to say that family finds a way. I thought she meant the family we choose, the family we build. Now, I think she knew something more. She knew that somewhere out there, I had brothers, and that someday, somehow, we'd find our way back to each other. Well, we did, and I'm never letting go again. The three men embraced again, and this time, their families joined them. 18 people in a massive group. Hug on the Family Feud stage. Cameras capturing every moment. As they finally prepared to leave, the kids were already deep in plans. The boys were organizing a cousin's football game for Thanksgiving. The girls were planning shopping trips and sleepovers. The wives were discussing recipes and holiday coordination. And at the center of it all were three brothers, identical in so many ways, different in others, but connected by something that 41 years of separation couldn't break. Same time next year? Tom asked, echoing what would become their catchphrase. Every year, Jimmy confirmed. Every day if we can manage it, Mike added. They walked off that stage different than they'd walked on. The Davidson family had grown by 12. The Bennett and Crawford families had grown too. But more than that, three men who had been incomplete were now whole. The episode would air to massive ratings. The reunion clip would go viral. Messages would pour in from other separated siblings, other adoptees, other families hoping for their own miracles. But for Mike, Tom, and Jimmy, none of that mattered as much as the group text that started that very night, as much as the first three-way phone call they'd have the next morning, as much as the plans they were already making for their joint birthday celebration. 41 years was a long time to be apart. But they had years ahead to be together. And that was more than enough. That was everything. The Christmas season that year would be legendary in 3 Ohio towns. As the triplets tried to outdo each other with elaborate light displays, the neighbors would complain good-naturedly about the traffic. The electric bills would be astronomical. And on Christmas Eve, 3 families would gather in Toledo, the kids running around together like they'd known each other all their lives, the adults marveling at how natural it all felt. Because that's what family does. It finds a way. Even if it takes 41 years, even if it requires DNA tests and television shows, and a series of coincidences that seem impossible, family finds a way. And somewhere, perhaps, Linda Patterson finally rested easy, knowing her boys were together again, just as she'd always prayed they would be.